Imagine for a second that you are tumbling.
Right, just completely in free fall.
Exactly. You've just slipped down this dark, narrow tunnel, the earth completely giving way beneath you, and suddenly you're falling down a very, very deep well.
But you're falling slowly, Greg.
Yeah, so slowly, in fact, that you have plenty of time to just, look around as you drift downward. And what do you actually see?
Probably not what you'd expect in a dirt well.
No, not at all. The walls aren't made of dirt or stone. They're lined with cupboards and bookshelves. There are maps and pictures hanging on little wooden pegs.
It's basically a subterranean living room.
Pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And you reach out, your hand brushing past this strange underground wallpaper, and you grab a jar from a shelf as you float past. The label, written in neat little letters, says orange marmalade.
But of course you look inside and it's completely empty.
Empty. So politely, because you don't want to drop it on whoever might be standing far below you, you carefully place it back into another cupboard as you continue to fall. Down, down, down.
Tumbling into a world where everything you thought you knew about logic, about rules, and about polite society is just about to be turned entirely aggressively on its head.
It is the ultimate disorientation.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you are stripped of your geographical coordinates, your physical stability, and very soon your fundamental sense of identity.
You aren't just falling through space.
No, you are falling through the cracks of reality itself.
And that feeling of absolute free fall is the entire premise of today's deep dive. We are looking at a story that practically invented the modern portal fantasy.
It really did set the blueprint for all of them.
It did. And we have a massive stack of sources today. We're looking at the original 1865 text of Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, along with just extensive historical, literary, and cultural data surrounding it.
It's a lot of material to cover.
It is. But our mission is to discover how a simple, entirely made-up story told to three little girls on a rowboat completely revolutionized children's literature and became one of the most culturally pervasive texts in human history. So let's unpack this.
Our approach today, though, requires stepping away from the superficial stuff.
Right, we're not just doing a plot summary.
Exactly. We aren't going to recount the basic plot of a girl chasing a white rabbit with a pocket watch. We are going to dissect the why.
The why is the best part.
It is. We are going to uncover the hidden mathematical satires, the biting critiques of Victorian upper-class society, and the genuine, visceral, existential dread that is woven right into the fabric of all this famous nonsense.
So if you are listening to this, I need you to do me a favor. Forget the sanitized pop culture versions of Alice you might have seen over the years.
Yeah, leave the Disney movies at the door for a minute.
Exactly. Forget the colorful theme park rides, the catchy songs, or the Halloween costumes for a second. I want you to prepare to look at the raw, original text with totally fresh eyes.
Because before we can understand the sheer, unadulterated madness of Wonderland, we actually have to establish the highly grounded, very real-world moment where it was born.
And it started on a boat.
Specifically, a heavy wooden rowboat on the River Isis.
Which is in Oxford, right?
Yes, a stretch of the Thames that runs through Oxford. And this was on July 4th, 1862.
Okay, so midsummer.
Right. And this date is deeply embedded in the lore of the book to the point of achieving a sort of mythical status. It's famously referred to as the Golden Afternoon.
Oh, yeah. The book itself even opens with a prefatory poem that leans hard into that myth.
Yeah.
It starts off, all in the golden afternoon, full leisurely we glide.
It paints this picture of a sun-drenched, idyllic English summer day.
Yeah, with a gentle breeze and perfectly behaved children listening in rapt attention.
Well, the historical reality paints a notably different picture.
Really, it wasn't sunny.
Not even close. So Lewis Carroll, whose real name was actually Charles Lutwidge Dodgson, was a mathematics don at Christ Church, Oxford.
Okay.
And on this particular day, he and his friend, the Reverend Robinson Duckworth, took the three young daughters of Henry Liddell out for a row.
And Henry Liddell was Dodgson's boss, essentially.
Exactly. He was the dean of Christ Church. The girls were Lorena, who was 13, Alice, who was 10, and Edith, who was 8.
So 3 young kids on a boat.
Yes, and they rowed upstream from Folly Bridge in Oxford to a village called Godstow. This is a distance of about 5 miles.
5 miles. Wait, rowing a heavy Victorian pleasure boat upstream for 5 miles? That is serious physical labor.
It is a serious workout. And regarding that supposedly golden afternoon, meteorological records from Oxford for July 4th, 1862, show that the weather was actually cool, cloudy, and rather wet.
So it was just a damp, miserable English summer day.
Pretty much. It was not a sun-drenched idyll. It was overcast and rainy.
That detail completely changes the context of the story's creation for me.
How so?
I mean, it's like a modern creative pitching a script to a tough crowd of kids on a boring, rainy car ride.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Right. You're trapped in a confined space. The weather outside is dreary. You have 3 restless children in stiff, uncomfortable Victorian clothing getting thoroughly bored.
And you just have to do something to stop them from complaining.
Exactly. You just start making up the wildest things possible purely as a survival tactic to keep them entertained. You're just throwing ideas at the wall, not realizing you are verbally drafting a literary masterpiece.
Well, Dodgson was incredibly adept at entertaining children, and Alice Liddell in particular was a real favorite of his.
Which makes sense, given the title.
Right. The literary biographer Robert Douglas Fairhurst actually suggests Dodgson favored Alice because her very name was ripe for literary allusion. Her middle name, Pleasance, literally means pleasure.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and the name Alice was popping up in contemporary romantic works of the time. But on this specific damp boat trip, the story he spun to keep them occupied was something he initially called Alice's Adventures Underground.
Underground, not Wonderland.
Correct. He sent the protagonist, named after the 10-year-old, sitting right across from him down a rabbit hole, and simply improvised what happened next.
The source notes point out that he told these girls stories all the time, but this one hit different.
It really did.
It was Alice herself who demanded he write it down. She specifically asked him to preserve this particular improvised ramble.
She wanted a physical copy of it, and you have to understand, Dodgson was a man obsessed with preservation.
In what way?
Well, he was a pioneering amateur photographer. He actually took 20 surviving portraits of Alice alone.
20? In the 1860s?
Yes, and photography back then was a laborious, chemical-heavy process. It required intense patience. Subjects had to sit perfectly still for a long time.
So it wasn't just snapping a quick picture on a phone.
Not at all. This background informed his almost obsessive focus on capturing fleeting moments of childhood before they inevitably disappeared into adulthood.
That's actually kind of beautiful, but also a bit melancholic.
It is. So when Alice asked him to write the story down, he treated it with the same meticulous dedication he applied to his photography.
He didn't just jot down some notes.
No, he spent the next 2 years painstakingly writing and illustrating a manuscript entirely by hand.
2 entire years hand-drawing a book just because a 10-year-old asked you to. Talk about committing to the bit.
He was incredibly dedicated. He finally presented it to Alice on November 26, 1864, as an early Christmas gift.
That is quite the present.
The dedication read, "A Christmas gift to a dear child in memory of a summer's day."
But the version he gave her, that original underground manuscript, is vastly different from the book we all know today, right?
Oh, completely. It's essentially a prototype. It is roughly half the length.
Only half.
Yeah. When he eventually decided to publish it for a wider audience, which he did on the advice of friends like the fantasy author George MacDonald, who tested the manuscript on his own children to great success, Dodgson expanded it significantly.
Okay, so he beefed it up for publication.
Exactly. The transition from Alice's Adventures Underground in 1864 to the published Alice's Adventures in Wonderland in 1865 is where the text fundamentally shifts.
How so?
It evolves from a private, sentimental gift for a specific child into a broader, much sharper public satire.
He added the really famous stuff.
He did.
Yeah.
He added entire iconic chapters like the Mad Hatter's Tea Party and the Pig and Pepper chapter. Those simply do not exist in the original handwritten manuscript.
That is wild to me. The Mad Hatter wasn't even in the original story. But even with all those massive additions for the public release, the DNA of that original damp boat ride is literally written into the fabric of Wonderland.
Oh, inextricably.
He didn't just invent these characters out of nowhere. He dressed up his reality in fantastical clothing. It's a Victorian Roman clef.
Yes, exactly. And for those listening who might be unfamiliar with the literary term, a Roman clef, which is French for novel with a key, is basically a story about real life overlaid with a facade of fiction.
Like an inside joke disguised as a novel.
Precisely. The real people, places, and events are disguised as fictional characters and settings. Carroll essentially took the occupants of the rowboat and dropped them straight into the narrative.
Let's actually map those characters out because the specific correlations are just wild.
Let's do it.
Okay, so in Chapter 3, Alice finds herself swimming in a giant pool of her own tears.
Which she cried when she was 9 feet tall.
Right. And she washes up on the bank with a bunch of strange, dripping wet birds and animals, and they end up having a completely nonsensical caucus race to get dry.
Running in circles.
Exactly. And the animals standing on that bank are the exact people from the boat.
They are.
The duck is Reverend Duckworth, which is, frankly, a bit of lazy naming, but it works.
It gets the point across. Then you have the lory, which is a type of brightly colored Australian parrot. That represents Lorena, the eldest Liddell sister.
Okay, Lori for Loriti.
And the eaglet is Edith, the youngest.
Okay, so the duck is Duckworth, the Lori is Lorena, the eaglet is Edith. But why make himself a dodo?
That's a great question.
I mean, it's an extinct, clumsy, rather tragic bird. Was Dodgson notoriously uncoordinated?
No, the choice of the dodo is actually a deeply personal piece of self-deprecation. Dodgson had a pronounced stammer.
Oh, really?
Yes, and it was particularly noticeable when he was nervous or speaking to other adults. He would sometimes get stuck on his own surname, introducing himself as Dodo Dodgson.
Oh, wow. Dodo Dodgson. Hence, he became the dodo.
Exactly. It was an inside joke that the girls would have immediately recognized and found hilarious.
That is surprisingly vulnerable for a Victorian academic.
It really shows the level of comfort he had with the children compared to adults.
But the inside jokes go way deeper than just the 5 people in the boat, right?
Oh, much deeper.
Later on in the book, at the Man Tea Party, the Dormouse tells a story about 3 little sisters living at the bottom of a treacle well.
A very strange story.
Very. And their names are Elsie, Lacey, and Tilly. These are the Liddell sisters all over again, hidden in a layer of wordplay.
Let's break those down.
Yeah, so Elsie sounds out the letters Elsie, which stands for Lorena Charlotte.
Right.
Lacey is a direct, perfect anagram of Alice.
Just shuffling the letters around.
Exactly. And Tilly is short for Matilda, which was Edith's family nickname.
It's remarkably clever, and the references extend to the broader Oxford academic circle they all inhabited, too.
Who else gets roasted in this book?
Well, the Mad Hatter himself is widely believed to be a reference to a local, highly eccentric Oxford furniture dealer named Theophilus Carter.
A furniture dealer.
Yeah, he was known to stand in the door of his shop wearing a top hat perched on the back of his head. He was a very recognizable local character.
That is so funny, just walking past a guy and deciding, yep, you're going into the fantasy novel.
And then there is the Mock Turtle.
Oh, the Mock Turtle scene is amazing.
He talks nostalgically about his education at the bottom of the sea, right? And he mentions a drawling master.
A drawling master.
Yes. Described as an old conger eel who came once a week to teach drawing, stretching, and fainting in coils.
Which sounds like an absolute nightmare of a curriculum.
Yeah.
I'm just picturing a giant eel forcing children to stretch and faint.
It's actually a direct, rather savage parody of the famous Victorian art critic John Ruskin.
John Ruskin,
Yeah.
the huge art guy.
The very same. Ruskin was a towering figure in the 19th century art world. He was a man of immense influence and serious demeanor.
So why is he an eel?
Because he actually came to the Liddell house once a week to teach the girls drawing, sketching, and painting in oils.
Oh my goodness, so drawing, sketching, and painting in oils becomes...
Drawing, stretching, and fainting in coils.
That is brutal.
Yeah.
To reduce the preeminent art critic of the age to a drawling conger eel is just a spectacular piece of academic mockery.
It's incredibly witty, and there are even potential political allusions tucked in there as well.
Okay, maintaining strict neutrality here as to the politics of the time, obviously. But who is getting mocked in government?
Take Bill the Lizard.
Oh, the guy who gets kicked up the chimney earlier in the book.
Yes, but later during the chaotic trial scene near the end of the book, Bill the Lizard is one of the jurors.
Right.
His pencil squeaks too loudly, so Alice just reaches over and takes it away from him.
Which forces him to write on his slate with his finger, which obviously leaves no mark.
Exactly. Well, there's a prominent theory that Bill the Lizard is a play on the name of the British Prime Minister at the time, Benjamin Disraeli.
Bill the Lizard is Benjamin Disraeli. That's fascinating. Carroll might be taking the highest, most powerful levels of British government and weaving them into a story about a little girl shrinking in a hallway, rendering them as ineffective lizards who can't even hold a pencil.
That's the theory. And if we connect this specific character mapping to the bigger picture, we have to ask why Dodgson built the story this way.
I hide all these real people in a children's book.
The biographer Morton N. Cohen argues that this structure served as a sophisticated coping mechanism for the plight of the child in Victorian upper-class society.
A coping mechanism.
Yes. The mistreatment Alice constantly faces from the chaotic, aggressive, and entirely unreasonable creatures of Wonderland, it mirrors Dodgson's own childhood experiences with the arbitrary authority of older people.
So he's punching up.
Exactly. He's building a world where the adults, the authority figures, the teachers, the politicians, are stripped of their real-world power and exposed as utterly ridiculous, pompous animals.
That sounds like great therapy for Dodgson, and honestly, a fun afternoon for the Liddell girls. But let me push back on this a little bit.
Sure.
If this entire book is just a dense thicket of hyper-specific inside jokes for an Oxford academic, his boss's kids, and a local furniture dealer, how on earth did it translate?
What do you mean?
I mean, why do we care about a parody of John Ruskin today? Most people reading Alice have no idea who Henry Liddell or Robinson Duckworth are, yet the book is universally beloved. How does an inside joke become a global phenomenon?
That paradox is the true genius of the work. The specific, real-world inside jokes, they are merely the architecture, they are the scaffolding.
Okay.
What those jokes actually do is tap into universal, timeless truths about authority, logic, and the sheer absurdity of the adult world.
So the specifics don't matter as much as the feeling.
Right. A modern 10-year-old child reading the book today doesn't need to know who John Ruskin is to find the phrase fainting in coils inherently hilarious.
True, it's just a funny phrase.
And they instantly recognize the archetype of a pompous, unhelpful teacher who talks down to them. The Roman clef elements gave the story its foundation, keeping it grounded in real human observation. But Carroll's absolute brilliance with linguistics gave it wings.
Which brings us perfectly to how Carroll basically weaponized the English language.
Yeah.
He didn't just mock his boss's appearance by making him a bird. He attacked the very foundation of how Victorian children were taught to speak, read, and think.
Absolutely. Victorian education for children, particularly in the affluent upper classes, was an incredibly rigid system.
It was very strict.
It was heavily based on rote memorization. Children were treated as empty vessels to be filled with facts.
No room for creativity?
None. They spent hours memorizing Latin declensions, historical dates, and deeply moralistic poetry. The goal of this education wasn't necessarily to foster critical thinking, it was to instill didactic lessons.
It was about obedience.
Exactly. It was designed to teach children how to be seen and not heard, how to suppress their natural impulses, and how to become morally upright, compliant citizens. The pressure was immense.
I can't even imagine. It's like if a modern kid was forced to memorize the entire Apple terms of service, and under pressure, their brain just completely short circuits.
That's a great way to think about it.
And Wonderland systematically dismantles that entire educational framework. Let's look at the pool of tears scene again.
Right, when she's swimming with the mouse.
Alice is swimming for her life alongside a giant mouse. And despite the panic of drowning, her primary concern is trying to figure out how to address the mouse politely.
Because that's what a good Victorian girl is trained to do, manners above survival.
Exactly. So she remembers her brother's Latin grammar book, and she recites the noun declensions for mouse while literally treading water.
She says, a mouse of a mouse to a mouse, oh mouse.
Which is an incredibly clever, multi-layered joke in itself.
It is. Those words correspond perfectly to the first 5 cases of Latin nouns. Nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, and vocative.
But the scholar, Don L.F. Nelson, points out a brilliant hidden punchline here.
He does.
Hold on, before we get to the hidden punchline, for those of us who, didn't attend an elite 19th century boarding school, what actually is the grammatical setup here? Like, what is she missing?
Right. So in Latin grammar, there is a 6th case.
Okay.
It's called the ablative case.
And what did that do?
The ablative is generally used to express concepts like movement away from something, or the instrument used to do something. It's often translated using by, with, or from.
Okay, got it.
But Alice completely omits the ablative case in her recitation.
She stops at vocative.
Yes. Why? Because her father, Henry Liddell, the man who employed Lewis Carroll, was the co-author of the massive, definitive Greek-English lexicon.
A dictionary everyone used.
A book that was a staple of classical education for decades. And crucially, the ancient Greek language does not have an ablative case.
Wait, really? That is just astounding.
It's a spectacular linguistic pun that operates on 2 entirely different frequencies.
On the surface, it's just a joke about a child blindly relying on rote schoolwork in a life-or-death situation.
Yes, but underneath, it's an Oxford Don giving a highly technical grammatical wink to the author of the Greek lexicon.
That is so nerdy, and I absolutely love it. And the linguistic subversion in this book is just relentless.
It doesn't stop. Later, when the White Rabbit mistakes Alice for his housemaid.
Oh, when she magically grows too large and gets stuck in his house.
Right. The rabbit sends his servant, Pat, to get her out. And Pat makes an excuse. He says he is digging for apples.
Which just sounds like random nonsense. Why would you dig for apples?
Exactly. But it's a cross-language pun. In French, the word for potato is pomme de terre.
Which translates literally to apple of the earth.
Yes. So he's not speaking nonsense. He's digging for potatoes, translated literally from French.
Mind blown again. But the most profound and, frankly, the most destructive linguistic subversions happen with the poetry.
Oh, the parodies are legendary.
As you mentioned, children of Alice's era were constantly forced to memorize poems meant to frighten them into good behavior.
They were constantly surrounded by the threat of hellfire or moral ruin.
Yeah, like, for instance, the theologian Isaac Watts wrote a famously strict nursery rhyme called Against Idleness and Mischief. It begins, "How doth the little busy bee improve each shining hour?"
The message of Watts's poem is explicitly clear. Work hard, be busy, do not be lazy, or the devil will find work for your idle hands.
Right. It is a terrifying mandate for constant industry.
Very Victorian.
But when Alice tries to recite it in Wonderland, and she's just doing this to fold her hands and be perfectly polite, trying to prove to herself that she hasn't lost her mind, her brain completely betrays her. The rote memorization fails.
It breaks down.
Instead of a hard-working, morally upright bee, she recites a poem about a deeply deceptive, predatory reptile. She says, "How doth the little crocodile improve his shining tail and pour the waters of the Nile on every golden scale? How cheerfully he seems to grin, how neatly spread his claws, and welcome little fishes in with gently smiling jaws."
It is a total calculated usurpation of the moral lesson.
That's so creepy.
It is. Instead of industry and piety, the poem is now about deceptive predation. The crocodile isn't working hard, it's luring the innocent to their deaths with a smile.
And she performs this same act of literary vandalism again with Robert Southey's poem, The Old Man's Comforts and How He Gained Them.
Another deeply didactic poem.
Yeah, Southey's poem was a tedious dialogue meant to teach children absolute, unquestioning respect for their elders' wisdom.
And in Alice's mouth, it becomes the famous, "You are old, Father William."
Where the youth asks the old man questions. But instead of sharing pious wisdom, the old man spends his time incessantly standing on his head, turning back somersaults in at the door, and balancing live eels on the end of his nose.
It completely disrespects the elder profoundly. And when the youth asks Father William how he manages to be so strong at his advanced age,
the old man says it's because he spent his youth arguing legal cases with his wife, which gave him muscular jaw strength that lasted the rest of his life.
it's totally absurd.
It's brilliant.
The scholar F.J. Harvey Darton actually argued that the publication of Alice single-handedly ended the era of didacticism in children's literature.
That's a huge claim.
It is, but before Carroll, books written for children were essentially thinly veiled lectures. They were medicinal.
Like taking your literary cod liver oil.
Exactly. Carroll replaced that stiff, suffocating Victorian didacticism with a looser, sillier nonsense style that aimed purely to delight and entertain. He took the heavy, moralizing tools of the adult world and smashed them, liberating the children's book in the process.
I want everyone listening to think about their own childhood for a second. Think about the sheer panic of being called on in class.
Oh, the worst feeling.
Right. Remember reciting multiplication tables until your brain went completely numb, just chanting 4 times 5 is 20, 4 times 6 is 24, over and over.
Just drilling it into your head.
Alice does exactly that. When she is sitting alone, terrified that she has been magically swapped with her less intelligent classmate named Mabel, she tries to test her own knowledge to prove her identity.
She tries math.
She says, let me see, 4 times 5 is 12, and 4 times 6 is 13, and 4 times 7 is, oh dear, I shall never get to 20 at that rate.
And if you follow her progression, 12, 13, 14, she will hit 19 at 4 times 12.
Which means she will indeed never reach 20.
The math is broken, but it has a strange internal consistency.
She realizes that the rigid rules of the adult world, the absolute certainties she was taught, simply do not hold up under the chaotic pressure of Wonderland.
They fall apart.
Which naturally leads us to a massive realization. It wasn't just spoken language, Latin grammar, and poetry that Carroll was playing with. His actual day job as an Oxford mathematician heavily fundamentally influenced the mechanics of the nonsense Alice encounters.
That is a fascinating area of study.
Let's get into the math.
The literary scholar Melanie Bailey has done brilliant work pointing out that Carroll wrote Alice during a period of intense, highly controversial upheaval in the mathematical world.
What was going on in math in the 1860s?
The mid-19th century saw the rapid development of non-Euclidean geometry and symbolic algebra. For centuries, math was based on Euclidean geometry, things like flat planes, reliable angles, math that described the physical, observable world.
Math you could draw on a piece of paper and measure.
Exactly. But Dodgson was a deeply conservative mathematician. He believed math should reflect reality. But suddenly, his contemporaries were moving math into highly abstract theoretical realms that had no basis in the physical world.
He was not a fan of the new abstract math.
He hated it. And Bailey theorizes that Alice is, in part, a biting, complex satire on these new mathematical concepts that Dodgson despised.
I absolutely love the idea of a stuffy Oxford Don getting so mad at a new kind of algebra that instead of writing an angry letter to an academic journal, he writes a globally beloved fantasy novel just to roast his colleagues. That is peak petty academic behavior.
It really is.
But how does that actually work in the text? How do you satirize abstract math in a story about a talking rabbit?
Let's look at the Mad Hatter's Tea Party.
Okay.
It is widely considered a masterpiece of mathematical and existential paradox. Bailey suggests the Tea Party is specifically targeting the work of William Rowan Hamilton.
Who was Hamilton?
Hamilton was a mathematician who created a number system called quaternions. In this system, there were 4 terms, and Hamilton crucially identified the 4th term as time. Time became an independent variable in the math.
Okay, so Hamilton makes a math system where time is a separate, detached thing. How does Carroll mock that at a tea party?
Well, when Alice arrives at the tea party, the Hatter, the March Hare, and the Dormouse are crammed into one corner of a massive table set for many people.
Right.
The Hatter explains to Alice that he had a terrible quarrel with Time, who he personifies as a him.
He fought with time.
Yes. And because of this fight, Time won't do a single thing the Hatter asks. Time has abandoned them, and the clock is permanently, irrevocably fixed at 6 p.m.
Which is, of course, tea time.
Precisely. Carroll is showing what happens when you mathematically decouple time from space, as Hamilton did. If time leaves the equation, you are stuck.
You're frozen.
And because it is permanently tea time, they never have time to wash the dishes. They must constantly rotate around the table, shifting to the next clean setting, leaving their dirty cups behind them.
Wow.
It is a closed system loop. It's a literal circle of madness that can never be resolved because time has ceased to be a functioning variable.
So Carroll is basically telling his colleagues, if you continue with this abstract math, this eternal, static, messy tea party is the universe you are creating.
That's the argument, yes.
That is just brilliant. It's the ultimate paradox. And right in the middle of this broken mathematical equation, the Hatter drops the most famous riddle in literary history.
He does.
He looks at Alice out of nowhere and asks, why is a raven like a writing desk?
And Alice is thrilled. She thinks they're finally playing a civilized parlor game.
Right. She loves rules.
She sits there trying to logic it out, listening to the Hatter and the Hare argue about semantic logic, like whether I see what I eat is exactly the same thing as I eat what I see.
Which it isn't, obviously.
No. But she tries to apply traditional reasoning to the puzzle. Finally, exhausted, she gives up and asks for the answer.
And the Hatter says, I haven't the slightest idea.
Nor does the March Hare.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because the lack of an answer isn't just a dodge. It is the actual punchline. The nonsense is the logic.
There is no hidden meaning.
None at all.
Humphrey Carpenter, a preeminent biographer of children's literature, notes that Carroll's brand of nonsense is highly specific. It isn't just chaotic gibberish. It embraces the nihilistic and the existential.
It's dark nonsense.
It is rule-bound. Carroll is exploring what happens when you take a logical premise and follow it to its absolute, absurd, terrifying extreme. The characters pose paradoxes that are structurally perfect as sentences, but entirely void of meaning. They trap Alice in logical cages.
And when mathematical and linguistic logic breaks down, it leads directly to a breakdown of physical reality.
Which is where things get genuinely scary for Alice.
Right. Alice is constantly losing control of her own physical body, and it's almost always because of what she consumes.
Yes.
Which leads us into one of the most persistent, unsettling, and frankly terrifying themes of the book: existential consumption.
The scholar Karina Garland notes how the landscape of Wonderland is continually expressed via representations of food and appetite.
Food is everywhere.
Alice is driven by what Garland calls curious appetites. From the very moment she lands at the bottom of the rabbit hole, her physical dimensions, her actual existence in space, are dictated by what she ingests.
It starts right away in that long hallway with the glass table. She finds the little bottle with the paper label beautifully printed with the words, "Drink me."
Which she notes has a mixed flavor of, what was it?
Cherry tart, custard, pineapple, roast turkey, toffee, and hot buttered toast.
An interesting combination.
Very. And she drinks it and shrinks down to a mere 10 inches high.
Then she finds the little glass box under the table with the cake marked, "Eat me," spelled out in currants.
She eats it and violently shoots up to 9 feet tall, hitting her head on the ceiling.
She is also altered by fanning herself with the White Rabbit's magical fan.
Oh, right, she shrinks again.
And later, the caterpillar provides her with the mushroom. One side makes her taller, the other side shorter. She has to carefully nibble from each hand, balancing her intake just to regulate her height back to normal.
But this constant obsessive intake of food has much darker undertones when you consider the Victorian context, right?
Oh, absolutely. Because Victorian children were intimately acquainted with mortality. Disease was rampant. Life was fragile. So in Wonderland, it's not just about Alice enjoying a snack. It's about what is eating what.
The food chain.
Exactly. Nina Auerbach, another literary critic, discusses how the novel fundamentally revolves around things entering and leaving mouths. But as the scholar Rose Lovell-Smith points out, Alice's shifting size continually, dangerously repositions her within the food chain.
That is such a fascinating point. When she is 10 inches tall, an ordinary puppy she encounters in the woods isn't just a cute pet.
No, it is a terrifying behemoth that could effortlessly trample or eat her.
And later, when her neck stretches high above the tree canopy after eating the mushroom, a pigeon aggressively attacks her face.
And because the pigeon is absolutely convinced Alice is a serpent coming to eat her eggs.
And Alice can't even assure the bird she isn't a threat. She admits she's a little girl, but the pigeon cross-examines her, and Alice truthfully confesses that little girls do eat eggs.
So to the pigeon, that just makes her a different type of serpent.
The categorization doesn't matter, the consumption does. Alice is suddenly hyper-aware of this brutal eat or be eaten attitude that permeates every interaction in Wonderland.
It creates a horrific underlying anxiety throughout the text. And let's look back at the riddle for a moment. Why is a raven like a writing desk?
Okay, the one with no answer.
We mentioned Carroll didn't have an answer when he wrote it, but years later, a scholar named Bo Burns put forward a chilling, deeply Victorian solution to the riddle.
Oh, I remember this from the notes. It's messed up.
It really is.
Yeah.
The solution is a raven eats worms and a wooden writing desk is worm-eaten.
That is incredibly dark.
It is an image of life feeding on life itself. The worm is the meal for the bird, and then eventually the worm becomes the eater of the wood and symbolically of the dead. It encapsulates the grotesque reality of mortality. The cycle of consumption is inescapable.
It's like Alice is a character in a video game collecting power-ups to bypass physical obstacles. But every single power-up comes with a terrifying loss of bodily autonomy.
That's a great modern parallel.
When she first shrinks in the hallway, she actually worries she might disappear entirely. She says, for it might end, in my going out altogether, like a candle.
That is some deep, profound existential dread for a 10-year-old girl to casually express.
Right. She's literally afraid of blinking out of existence.
And we see physical bodies being treated as consumable, malleable, or as livestock throughout her journey. Let's look at the chapter Pig and Pepper.
Okay.
Alice visits the Duchess, whose kitchen is filled with thick, choking pepper that makes everyone sneeze violently.
It's chaos in there. The cook is throwing fire irons at people.
Yes. And the Duchess is nursing a baby. When she decides to go play croquet, she carelessly throws the baby to Alice.
Just tosses a human infant.
And Alice carries the baby outside to save it from the violence. But as she walks through the woods looking at it, the baby's nose turns into a snout, its eyes shrink, and it begins grunting.
It literally transforms into a pig, right in her arms.
And Alice just sets it down, and it trots off into the woods to live as a pig.
She thinks to herself that it would have made a dreadfully ugly human child, but it makes rather a handsome pig.
It's a literal transformation of a human infant into livestock.
That's horrifying when you really think about it.
It reinforces the grim fluidity of life and death, predator and prey, human and animal in this universe. No form is permanent and everything can potentially be consumed.
So as Alice navigates this perilous, shifting food chain, she is desperately searching for the rules to keep herself safe. She wants instructions on how to survive,
Naturally.
which leads her to expose the completely arbitrary, often violent nature of adult authority.
The literary scholar Daniel Bivona writes that Alice is characterized by game-like social structures.
What does that mean?
It means Wonderland is extremely rule-bound, but the rules are alien to our world. What's fascinating here is the stark contrast between Alice and the native creatures of Wonderland.
How so?
Well, the creatures approach their world's madness uncritically. They just accept the chaos as normal. But Alice, as the critic Gillian Beers suggests, constantly looks for rules to soothe her anxiety. She craves order.
She actively seeks out instructions. Like when she first falls down the hole and finds the drink me bottle, she doesn't just chug it.
No, she's cautious.
She deliberately checks the bottle to make sure it doesn't say poison because she remembers cautionary tales of children who got burned or eaten by wild beasts simply because they didn't follow the rules. She wants to be obedient.
But the rules in Wonderland are chaotic and actively hostile. Look at the Queen of Hearts croquet game.
Oh, man. That game is pure stress.
It is the ultimate manifestation of arbitrary, unyielding authority masking total incompetence. The physical ground of the court is made of deep ridges and furrows.
And the croquet balls are live hedgehogs.
The mallets are live flamingos.
And the arches are the Queen's playing card soldiers, doubled over on their hands and feet.
And the equipment actively refuses to cooperate.
Right. Alice gets the flamingo tucked nicely under her arm, and just as she goes to hit the hedgehog, the flamingo twists its long neck round and looks up into her face with such a puzzled expression that she bursts out laughing.
And the hedgehog unrolls itself and just crawls away.
And the soldiers who form the arches keep getting up and wandering off to other parts of the garden when the Queen isn't looking.
Furthermore, there is no turn-taking. They play all at once, shouting and fighting over the hedgehogs.
It's complete pandemonium.
It's a game completely devoid of structure, fairness, or logic, yet it is governed by the absolute lethal authority of the Queen.
Who just stomps around screaming, off with his head, or off with her head, about once a minute at the slightest provocation.
It is a portrait of tyrannical adult rage.
Then there is the Mock Turtles education system we talked about earlier. We laughed at the drawing master, but look at the rest of his classes.
Oh, yeah.
He lists the regular courses, reeling and writhing, of course. Then the branches of arithmetic, ambition, distraction, uglification, and derision.
A clear spoof on reading, writing, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division.
But when Alice asks how many hours a day he did lessons, he says 10 hours the first day, 9 the next, and so on.
And the Griffin explains the pun, saying that's the reason they're called lessons, because they lessen from day to day.
A joke, yes, but think about the underlying implication there.
What's that?
The education system is actively degrading. The more time you spend in it, the less you do, until presumably it vanishes entirely.
It is a profoundly cynical view of institutional learning.
This absurdity all culminates in the grand finale, the trial of the Knave of Hearts, who is accused of stealing the Queen's tarts. It perfectly, ruthlessly exposes the sham of judicial authority.
The trial is brilliant. The King of Hearts serves as the judge, wearing his crown awkwardly perched over his judicial wig.
A great visual.
And during the trial, Alice, who is watching from the gallery, begins to physically grow large again.
Because she's eating the mushroom.
Actually, it just kind of happens spontaneously. And the king, intimidated by her growing physical presence, suddenly reads a rule from his notebook. He says, Rule 42. All persons more than a mile high to leave the court.
Notice how the king invokes a rule only when he feels physically threatened. Authority relies on invented statutes to maintain dominance.
Precisely.
And Alice just calls him out. She doesn't cower. She says, I'm not a mile high. Besides, it's not a regular rule. You invented it just now.
And the king insists it's the oldest rule in the book.
And later, when they're considering the evidence, which is just a letter containing a set of completely nonsensical verses that prove absolutely nothing the Queen demands, sentence first verdict afterwards.
It is the ultimate critique of how adult society relies on arbitrary rules and blind obedience to maintain power. The justice system is exposed as a theatrical farce designed only to inflict punishment, not to discover truth.
So what does this all mean for you listening? Think about how often in your own life, your own workplace, your own society, you do things just because that's the way it's done.
We all follow broken rules.
We do. And Alice represents the child's clear-eyed, uncorrupted ability to look at massive adult bureaucracy, see that the emperor has no clothes, and loudly call it out. By the end of the trial, when she has grown to her full, towering size and the queen orders her immediate beheading, Alice doesn't run away.
No, she stands her ground.
She simply looks at the entire screaming courtroom and says, "Who cares for you? You're nothing but a pack of cards."
She recognizes the artifice.
Exactly.
She breaks the illusion of authority by stating the plain material reality of her oppressors. They aren't kings and queens, they are flimsy pieces of cardboard. Once she names their reality, they lose all their power over her, and they fly up into the air, waking her from the dream.
Which is such an immensely empowering moment of catharsis. But this brilliant subversion of society, this empowering rebellion, it almost didn't reach the public.
Oh, it came very close to failing.
The physical creation of this book, transitioning it from Dodgson's mind to a printed object, was rigorous, dramatic, and almost obsessive.
The publication history is a saga in itself, revealing just how protective Dodgson was of his vision.
He first met Alexander Macmillan, the powerful London publisher, in October 1863.
Yes, Macmillan agreed to publish the book, recognizing its unique charm. But remarkably, Dodgson actually financed the initial print run entirely by himself.
Wait, why would he do that? If a major, reputable publisher agrees to take your book, why on earth would you pay for the printing costs out of your own pocket?
Because paying for it gave him total, unassailable editorial control.
The ultimate creative control.
Exactly. He wasn't beholden to Macmillan's budget or deadlines. He managed the typesetting directly. He engaged the illustrators himself. He oversaw the physical dimensions of the book.
He micromanaged it.
He did. He approached John Tenniel, who was already famous as the chief political cartoonist for the highly influential satirical magazine Punch.
So he got a big name for the art.
He wanted Tenniel to reinterpret his original amateur drawings, and Tenniel provided 42 spectacular wood-engraved illustrations.
And the collaboration between Dodgson and Tenniel was notoriously intense. Two massive perfectionists just clashing.
Very intense. The first run of 2,000 copies was finally printed and ready by July 1865.
Okay.
But Tenniel received his advance copy, looked at the pages, and objected to the print quality. He wasn't happy with how the illustrations looked. The ink was bleeding slightly, or the pressure of the press wasn't right.
And because Dodgson had financed it and maintained total control, he actually listened to his illustrator.
He did. He instructed Macmillan to halt the publication entirely.
He scrapped the whole run.
He destroyed the UK print run. Though some unbound sheets were later sold to a publisher in the US with a different title page to recoup costs, the primary UK run was scrapped.
Wow.
Dodgson then paid £600, entirely out of his own pocket, to reprint the book with a completely new printer, Richard Clay, who he felt could do the woodblocks justice.
Let's put that in perspective for a second. £600 in 1865 is a staggering amount of money.
It was a fortune.
It is the equivalent of tens of thousands of dollars today. It's like an indie filmmaker today taking out a second mortgage to shoot a movie, getting it perfectly edited, and then burning the expensive master print right before the premiere just because the color grading was slightly off in one scene.
And then paying to reshoot it.
Yes, it shows a fierce, almost terrifying dedication to his artistic vision. Because of that massive recall, there are only 22 known first edition copies of that initial rejected 1865 run in existence today,
making them some of the rarest books in the world.
The new approved edition finally came out in November 1865, though it was dated 1866. And Dodgson insisted it be bound in bright red cloth because he deems that color the most appealing to young readers.
And it was an immediate sensation.
But interestingly, regarding those famous illustrations, Tenniel did not portray the real historical Alice Liddell.
No, he didn't. The real Alice had dark haircut with a short, straight fringe. Tenniel drew a girl with long, flowing blonde hair.
And the iconic blue dress we all associate with Alice. The one from the Disney movie and countless Halloween costumes. That wasn't even established in the original publication.
It wasn't.
No. That visual canon wasn't set until 1911, when an artist named Harry Thieker was commissioned to color 16 of Tenniel's original black and white plates for a new edition.
Oh, that's fascinating. I didn't know the blue dress came that late. But despite the visual differences from the real girl, the text and Tenniel's illustrations became totally symbiotic. They are permanently fused in the cultural consciousness.
The source material notes a fascinating event about that, actually. When the copyright on the book finally expired in the UK in 1907, and the text entered the public domain, a plethora of publishers rushed to release new versions with new contemporary illustrators.
They flooded the market.
They did. But the public and the literary reviewers actually rejected them.
Because Tenniel's vision was inextricably linked to Carroll's words. You cannot imagine the Mad Hatter, the White Rabbit, or the grinning Cheshire Cat looking any other way.
The specific cross-hatching, the slightly grotesque realism of Tenniel's animals, it perfectly matches the sharp, unsentimental tone of Carroll's nonsense.
That fierce dedication, that financial risk, and that perfect artistic marriage paid off exponentially. It turned a personal, improvised tale into a global, timeless phenomena.
Alice has become what we might call a cultural inkblot.
Let's talk about that legacy, because the sheer scale of it is hard to wrap your head around. It has literally never been out of print since 1865.
Never out of print.
And it has been translated into 174 languages. Think about the linguistic difficulty of translating the ablative case joke or the pomme de terre pun into Japanese or Swahili.
Right. How do you translate a Latin grammar pun based on a Greek lexicon into another language?
Yet translators attempt it because the core story is so vital. Walt Disney himself wrote in 1946, "No story in English literature has intrigued me more than Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland."
And he released his famous animated film in 1951, which obviously codified the imagery for a whole generation. But the very first screen adaptation was a British silent film made way back in 1903 when cinema was still in its infancy.
And its influence spans every conceivable medium. Eva Le Gallienne staged famous, highly acclaimed theatrical plays in the 1930s.
It has been adapted into complex contemporary operas by composers like Chen.
It has been turned into massive, visually stunning ballets by choreographers like Christopher Wheeldon at the Royal Opera House.
It deeply influences modern music, too. John Lennon explicitly attributed the surreal, fantastical imagery of the Beatles song Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, the tangerine trees and marmalade skies, directly to his childhood reading of Carroll's books.
It even became a vessel for intense political expression.
Yes, the Argentine prog rock band Cerro Girón used Alice as an extended, thinly veiled metaphor to represent the tense, dangerous, and oppressive political climate in Argentina under the military dictatorship during the 1970s.
Their song, Canción de Alicia en el País, used the Queen of Hearts and the madness of Wonderland to sing about disappearances and tyranny without getting censored.
The story is so incredibly elastic, so fundamentally robust, that it can hold almost any meaning you pour into it.
There was even a widespread contemporary myth that Queen Victoria loved the book so much she requested Carroll's next publication be sent directly to her.
I love this story.
And according to the myth, she was thoroughly bewildered when she received a dry, highly technical mathematical treatise on determinants.
I desperately want that to be true.
It is a delightful story, though Dodgson himself vehemently publicly denied it ever happened. But the fact that the myth existed and was widely believed speaks to the absolute cultural saturation of the book.
As Robert Douglas Fairhurst wrote, the blank-faced, rational little girl, made famous by Tenniel's illustrations, has become a cultural inkblot we can interpret in any way we like.
From surrealist masters like Salvador Dali, who provided stunning, melting illustrations for a 1969 edition, to modern video game designers mapping out deep psychological trauma and horror in games like American McGee's Alice. Everyone projects their own specific anxieties, fears, and wonders onto her.
She is the ultimate dauntless, no-nonsense heroine navigating a world of absolute madness. She doesn't have a sword or magic powers. She just has logic, manners, and a profound refusal to put up with nonsense.
And in doing so, she single-handedly created the template for the entire modern portal fantasy genre. Every story where a normal person falls into a magical world and has to learn the rules from Narnia to the Matrix owes a massive debt to Alice.
Indeed. And it all stems from a story that simply sought to entertain a bored child on a damp boat rather than to lecture her.
That's quite a legacy.
So we have journeyed a long way today. From a rainy boat trip on the River Isis to a biting satire of 19th century symbolic algebra, we've seen a linguistic rebellion against the crushing weight of Victorian rote learning.
And we've unpacked an existential masterpiece about the brutal reality of the food chain and the completely arbitrary, fragile nature of adult authority.
It is the book that liberated children's literature forever.
Which brings up an important, lingering question, and it's hidden right at the very end of the novel, a moment people often forget.
What happens at the end?
After Alice wakes up from her dream, she tells her older sister, the one who is reading the boring book with no pictures on the back, all about her curious adventures. And then Alice runs off to have her tea, but she leaves her older sister sitting alone on the bank.
Right. Alice runs off to be a kid, and the sister just sits there, resting her head on her hand, watching the setting sun.
Exactly. And as the sister sits there, she begins to dream of Wonderland herself. She doesn't fall down the hole, but she looks at the real world, and she imagines the rustling grass as the white rabbit hurrying by.
She imagines the splash of the nearby pool is the giant mouse swimming.
She hears the tinkling of the sheep bells in the distance and imagines it's the queen ordering her executions, and the voice of the shepherd boy calling his flock becomes the violent sneeze of the duchess's pig baby.
The real world is suddenly overlaid with the magic. She is completely, irrevocably overtaken by the story.
Wonderland isn't just a physical place Alice visited in her sleep. It is a contagion of imagination. By simply hearing the story, the sister is infected by it. The mundane world will never look the same to her again.
And for over 160 years, so is every single reader who picks up the book.
The true magic of the text isn't just that Alice fell down the rabbit hole, it's that she dragged the rest of the world down there with her.
Which leaves us with this final thought for you. In a modern world full of its own arbitrary rules, chaotic logic, algorithms, and relentless demands on our time and identity, what rabbit holes are you letting shape your reality today? Are you questioning the nonsense around you, demanding to know the rules, or are you just drinking the potion and hoping for the best? Thanks for tumbling down this one with us. Go pick up the original text, read it closely, and see what nonsense suddenly makes sense to you.